I used to tell people that the worst day of my life was the day I buried my husband. I was wrong. The worst day was a Tuesday in November, 3 years after Leonard passed, when my daughter called me from a number I didn't recognize and said, almost bored, "Mom, I need you to know I transferred everything from your joint accounts into the business account. Keith and I needed the capital. It was either that or lose the whole thing. You'll be fine." And then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, in my bathrobe, holding the phone, staring at the coffee maker like it owed me an explanation. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the leaves. A cardinal landed on the fence post. The world was just going about its business, completely unbothered, while mine had just caved in. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. $43.16. That's what was left. I almost laughed. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding who my daughter was before she became the person who could do something like that. Adrian was my firstborn, 38 years old at the time of that phone call, sharp as a tack, and the kind of person who remembered every slight but forgot every kindness. She got that from her father's side. Leonard was a patient man, God rest him, but his mother could hold a grudge across a decade without it losing any heat. Adrian inherited that, plus something else I could never quite name, an ambition that had no flaw. She was always capable, I'll give her that. Graduated top of her class, got herself a marketing job in Atlanta, married Keith Donovan when she was 31. Keith was handsome in the way that makes you nervous, the kind of handsome that knows it's handsome. He had a firm handshake and called me Mrs. Whitmore for 6 years before I finally told him to stop. He switched to Mom, and somehow that was worse. I never trusted Keith. That's the honest truth, and I'm done being polite about it. There was something about the way he looked at my house the first time Adrian brought him home for Thanksgiving. Not at me, not at my daughter. At the house, the fireplace, the bay windows, the wraparound porch Leonard and I had added in 2003. He looked at all of it, the way a cat looks at a bird on the other side of a window. But Adrian loved him, so I kept my mouth shut. I smiled at Christmas. I sent the birthday cards. I wired money twice when they were in between things, and I told myself that's just what mothers do. Leonard died of a heart attack in the spring. He was in the backyard planting tomatoes, which is exactly the kind of thing he would have been doing. He was 67. We had plans. Portugal in September, a new deck, maybe a rescue dog. We had so many plans. After the funeral, after everyone went home and the casserole stopped coming, I found out we had less than I thought. Not nothing, we weren't broke, but Leonard had been the one managing everything, and there were some decisions he'd made toward the end that hadn't gone well. The retirement accounts were smaller than I expected. The mortgage still had 11 years on it. I was fine, but I was not cushioned, if you understand what I mean. There was no room for catastrophe. I went back to work part-time at the school district, answering phones in the main office. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy, and the health insurance was decent. Every month I put a little aside. Every month I was a little more okay. Adrian knew most of this, not the exact numbers, but the shape of it. She knew. The business idea started about 8 months before that phone call. Adrian and Keith wanted to open a fitness studio, some kind of boutique concept, reformer, Pilates, infrared sauna, the kind of thing that charges $120 for a single class and the clients feel grateful for it. I didn't say anything negative. I asked the right questions. I looked at the business plan Keith sent me in a PDF that was mostly stock photos and font choices. "We just need a little help getting started," Adrian said. "Just to bridge the gap until the SBA loan comes through." I lent them $22,000. I want to be clear that it was a loan, because Adrian has a way of letting things become gifts after the fact, and I wrote it down. I have the text messages. I have her saying, "Of course, Mom, we'll pay you back as soon as the studio opens." The studio did not open on schedule. Something about the contractor, then something about the permits, then something about a dispute with the landlord. There was always something. And the whole time Adrian was calling me, not as often as I would have liked, but enough. And I could hear Keith in the background sometimes, that low voice of his. In October, she called and asked if she could be added to my primary checking account. Just as a backup, Mom, in case something happens to you and we need to pay your bills. It's just responsible planning. I should have said no. I knew even as I was saying yes that I should have said no, but she framed it as concern for me, and I was 64 years old and I had recently had a dizzy spell that my doctor said was nothing but that had scared me a little, and the word responsible landed somewhere tender. Leonard always handled the finances. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have someone who could step in. I added her name to the joint checking. Just the joint checking. Not my savings, not my retirement account, not the secondary account I'd opened at a different bank the year before, the one I called my quiet money, because that one was mine and only mine, and I had never told anyone about it. That was the account I'd been quietly building since the second year of our marriage. $22 here, $40 there, whenever I had a little left over. Not because I didn't trust Leonard, I did, completely. But because my mother told me once when I was young, a woman should always have a little something nobody else can see. I listened to her. I'm glad I did. So when Adrian cleaned out the joint checking in November, $4,100, which doesn't sound like much until it's everything you have liquid, she did not know about the quiet money. She did not know I had a savings account in my name, only at a credit union across town with $18,000 in it. She did not know I had already spoken to a lawyer. That part I'll get to. I didn't call her back that night. I sat with it. I made myself eat dinner. Leftover soup, the good kind with the white beans, because I was not going to fall apart over a woman who had my phone number memorized and still chose a number I didn't recognize. I watched 2 episodes of something I can't remember now. I went to bed. In the morning, I called my lawyer, Patrice, who I'd been seeing for estate planning since the year before. She's thorough, Patrice, and she asks the kind of questions that make you think she already knows the answer. She had access to the account, Patrice said. Joint accounts are complicated, but there's a question of intent. The intent was to take my money, I said. Tell me everything. I told her everything. The $22,000 loan that was apparently now a donation. The permit issues, and the contractor and the excuses that changed shape every month. The conversation about adding her to my account. The phone call. Do you have the text messages where she agreed to repay the initial loan? I do. Do you have documentation of the transfer? I logged into my account this morning. I can see exactly when it happened. Sunday at 11:47 p.m., while I was asleep. There was a pause. Okay, Patrice said. Here's what we're going to do. What we did was this. Patrice filed a civil claim for the $22,000 loan, which was documented and witnessed. She also sent a formal demand letter about the checking account, which, because of the circumstances, joint account. No prior agreement about access, transfer made without discussion, had some legal grey area, but enough of it to make Keith and Adrian nervous. I also called the bank. I explained what happened. I removed Adrian from the account and flagged the transfer. The fraud department opened an inquiry. I want to be honest, it didn't move fast. None of it moved fast. There were weeks where I heard nothing, and I'd be at work answering phones, and someone's parent would call in their child sick, and I would think, my own child did this to me, and I would just breathe through it. Adrian called 3 times in that first month. I didn't pick up. She sent a text that said, Mom, I know you're upset, but you don't understand the situation we were in. We were going to lose everything. I read it 6 times. I did not respond. Her husband, Keith, this man who called me ma'am and looked at my house like inventory, had the nerve to show up on my front porch on a Saturday morning in December. I watched him from the upstairs window for a full 2 minutes before I opened the door. Mrs. Whitmore, he said. He looked uncomfortable, which I appreciated. I think there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I said. Adrian was just trying to keep the business alive. We fully intend to pay you back. With what money, Keith? He blinked. The business isn't open, I said. The SBA loan didn't come through. You have no revenue. I checked the business registration. Your LLC is delinquent on its annual filing, so I'd like to know with what money you plan to repay me. He looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in his face. We might need to talk to a lawyer, he said. I already have one, I said, and I closed the door. Here is the part I wasn't prepared for, the part that broke me open in a way nothing else had. 2 weeks after Keith's visit, my granddaughter called me. My granddaughter is Imani. She's 16, Adrian's daughter from a relationship before Keith, and she is the best part of the last 20 years of my life. She calls me Grandma Elaine. She texts me memes I don't always understand. She spent a whole summer teaching me to make Haitian food because she read somewhere that Leonard had some Caribbean heritage and she wanted to connect to it. She is a better person at 16 than most people become in a lifetime. She called me from her cell phone, which she usually only does for actual emergencies. Grandma Elaine, she said, I need to tell you something. I sat down. I know what Mum and Keith did, she said. I overheard them talking about it before it happened. I didn't know how to. I didn't know what to do. I should have warned you. I'm sorry. I could hear that she had been crying. Sweetheart, I said, this is not your job. They talked about it for weeks, she said. Keith kept saying that you wouldn't notice right away, and by the time you did, the business would be open and they could pay it back before it became a thing. Mom kept saying she wasn't sure, but then she did it anyway. I asked her one question. Did they say anything about my other accounts? A pause. Keith said he looked, but he could only find the one. He was frustrated about it. Good. Patrice had advised me to keep it quiet, and I had. Imani, I said, are you safe? Are they treating you okay? They're not. They don't care what I think. They don't care about anything right now except the studio. She was quiet for a moment. Can I come stay with you for a while? You get on that bus, I said. You come right now if you want. She came for 3 weeks, Imani did. She slept in the room with the purple curtains that used to be Adrian's, and in the evenings we watched cooking shows, and she helped me go through some of Leonard's boxes that I'd been avoiding for 2 years. She found a photograph of him at around her age, maybe 17, and she held it for a long time without saying anything. He would have really liked you, I told her. I know, she said, which might have sounded arrogant from anyone else, but from Imani it was just true. She knew exactly who she was. Having her there steadied me. The legal process went on for 4 months. I won't pretend it was clean or satisfying in the moment. There were filings and counter-filings and one meeting where I sat across a conference table from my daughter and her husband and watched them perform a version of remorse that had clearly been coached. Adrian cried. Keith kept looking at the door. At one point, Adrian said, Mom, you have to understand, we would have lost everything. I looked at her. My daughter. This woman I had watched enter the world, learn to walk in my living room, cried over her first heartbreak on my shoulder. You transferred money out of my account at midnight, I said. On a Sunday, while I was asleep. She looked at the table. That's not someone in a panic, I said. That's someone who made a plan. That was the last thing I said in that meeting. The civil judgment came down in my favor for the full $22,000, plus legal fees. The checking account situation was messier. Joint accounts are genuinely complicated, and I understood that going in, but the bank's fraud inquiry resulted in them recovering a portion of the transfer, and the documentation of the loan repayment agreement was enough leverage that Keith eventually signed an agreement to repay the balance over 18 months. Do I believe he'll make every payment? No. But Patrice has it locked down so tightly that any missed payment triggers an automatic default judgment, and Keith Donovan does not want a default judgment attached to his name when he tries to get financing for anything ever again. So we'll see. The studio eventually opened. I drove past it once. There were pink neon lights in the window and a sandwich board on the sidewalk that said opening special first class free. I did not stop. I kept driving. Adrian and I have not spoken in 8 months. I don't know if we will. I've thought about this a lot. Longer than I've thought about anything, maybe, except Leonard's passing. And the honest answer is that I don't know how you come back from what she did. Not the money. Money I can survive. What she did was look at me, at my house, my savings, my security, the things Leonard and I spent 31 years building, and calculate. She looked at her own mother, and she made a spreadsheet. Maybe someday she'll be different. People change. I've seen it. I know a woman from church who estranged herself from her son for 6 years, and now they have dinner every Sunday, and she says it's better than it ever was. I hold that, but I'm 65 years old, and I am done pretending that love is enough to make someone trustworthy. It isn't. Those are two different things. I loved my daughter. I still do, but I will never put her name on anything of mine again. Imani calls me twice a week. She's still living with Adrian and Keith. She's a minor, I can't change that. But she has a plan, she tells me. She's looking at colleges with strong nursing programs. She wants to get out of Atlanta. She asked me once if I'd come visit her at school someday, wherever she ends up, and I said I would be there before she finished unpacking her boxes. Promise? She said. Imani, I said. I have been keeping promises my whole life, ask anyone. She laughed. She has a laugh like sunlight, that girl. I want to say one thing about the money, because I know people wonder. The 18,000 in the quiet account is still there. I haven't touched the principal. I still add to it when I can. My mother told me to always have a little something nobody else can see, and I am telling you the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's $20 a month. Open an account at a different bank from your joint accounts. Put it in your name only. Don't tell your children, don't tell your siblings, don't tell anyone except maybe your lawyer. I'm not saying your family would do what my daughter did, I pray they wouldn't. But the quiet money isn't about distrust. It's about knowing that the world can change on a Tuesday morning, and you need to still be standing when it does. I'm still standing. Leonard always said I was the stubborn one. He said it like it was a problem. I think he knew, toward the end, that it wasn't. I keep his picture on the kitchen windowsill, right next to the coffee maker. Every morning I make my coffee, and I look at him and I think about all the plans we had. And I miss him so much it's like missing an organ. But I also know, I feel it in a way I can't fully explain, that he would be proud of me. Not for being right. Not even for winning. For not letting anyone make me small. That's the thing, in the end, about the worst Tuesday of my life. Yes, I woke up to $43 in my account. Yes, my daughter did that to me. Yes, it hurt in a way I did not have language for. But by 9 o'clock that morning, I had a lawyer on the phone. By noon, I had a plan. And by the time the cardinal came back to the fence post that afternoon, same bird, I'm almost sure of it, I had decided that I was not a woman. This story was going to end. I'm the one who decides how this story ends, and I'm not done yet. I've been thinking about what my mother used to say, that the way a person treats you when they need something tells you everything you'll ever need to know about them. I didn't fully understand that when I was young. I thought love was the thing that overrode everything else. I thought if you loved someone enough, and they loved you back, the rest was just nornies. Adrian taught me I was wrong about that. What she did wasn't impulsive. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't panic one morning and make a terrible decision she immediately regretted. She planned it. She had conversations with Keith about it for weeks. Imani heard them. She told me so. They discussed the timing. They discussed whether I would notice. They concluded that by the time I did, it wouldn't matter anymore. That's not a mistake. That's a choice made carefully, with full knowledge of what it would mean for me. And here's the thing about choices, they accumulate. Every small decision a person makes about who they are adds up, over time, into the person they become. Keith looked at my house like inventory the first Thanksgiving I met him, and I noticed it. And I filed it away, and I told myself I was being uncharitable. But I wasn't. I was reading him correctly, years before he gave me reason to. The person who looks at a widow's home and sees an asset has already told you exactly who they are. I just didn't want to hear it. I think about Imani when I think about this. She's 16 years old. She grew up in the same house as that thinking, surrounded by two adults who looked at the people around them and saw what could be extracted. And she called me anyway. She told me the truth even when it cost her something, even when it made her home harder to live in. That's not an accident. That's character, built quietly over years, out of choices her mother and stepfather didn't even notice she was making. Character works the same way in both directions. You build it or you erode it, one decision at a time, and by the time anyone can see the result clearly, the work has already been done. I built mine over 65 years. I saved money in a quiet account for decades because I believed a woman should always have something of her own. I called a lawyer before I called my daughter back because I knew that grief and anger make bad strategy. I kept my composure on my front porch when Keith stood there talking about misunderstandings because I had already decided, long before he rang that bell, that I was not going to be made small by people who confused my patience for weakness. None of that happened by accident. It happened because somewhere along the way I understood that intelligence without discipline is just potential going to waste, and that surviving hard things requires you to think before you feel, especially when every part of you wants to do it the other way around. The civil judgment came down in my favor. The money is coming back, slowly. But I want to be honest with you. The money was never really the point. What I needed to know, what I think anyone in that situation needs to know, is that you don't have to accept the version of yourself that someone else's cruelty tries to create. Adrian wanted me to be a victim, a confused old woman who didn't understand what had happened until it was too late. I refused that role, not out of stubbornness, but out of clarity. You get to decide what this story means. You get to decide what you do next. And if you're paying attention, if you're honest with yourself about what you see, you usually know more than people think you do. I knew. I just waited for the right moment to show it.